So it's taken the journey through these cameras that has brought me back to the Elon 7 and these other cameras like the F1 and F3. In this video, I'm talking about film cameras, and I will try to give you a relatively quick look at my film camera journey that has essentially landed me to these three cameras as the main cameras I pick up and shoot on a daily basis. Most recently, the F3, which I am trying to use most of the time right now. I started recording this video a while ago, but I really feel like that video was going to be like 3 hours long. So maybe one day I'll do a live video and do that kind of long thing, but I know that not everyone's going to be interested in watching something super long. So I want to keep this somewhat succinct, but also want to help people that are searching for film cameras. I want to maybe give them some shortcuts, and if I share a couple things that happened to me along my journey, it might give you some hints on what to look for with yours. So just a quick backstory on my experience with film photography. When I was a kid, my dad bought me and my brother an Olympus OM10, which is actually this specific camera right here. And that camera was my main camera until I was in college, and it stopped working, and I didn't have the resources at the time to fix it. So I was without a camera of my own, essentially, and over the next multiple years, I would shoot anything I could with anyone else's camera, but it wasn't until I got a digital power shot that I was able to get back into photography in some aspect or another. This was during that time of that transition from film photography to digital photography in terms of the professional lineup. Consumers were already kind of dipping their toe into it on a regular basis, but the pros weren't quite there yet. So this was during that transition period. I had the Canon power shot, then went to the iPhone. Well, it was the iPhone 4 at the time, and started shooting images again and got really excited about shooting still images and photography. I went from the iPhone to a DSLR finally, because the video features of DSLRs were increasing rapidly. The 5D Mark II was this landmark release from Canon that introduced independent filmmakers to affordable, interchangeable lens cameras. And that was a really big deal for the independent filmmaker, the YouTube creator, and I wanted to jump on that. So I got a Canon T4i around the time that it was released, and fell in love with that camera, fell in love with shooting video on it, but I also fell in love with shooting still images on it. And that really was the launching point to where I'm at now. Now, at some point after I got the T4i, I realized that I wanted to revisit film photography again for many reasons. One of them was that at this time, when the T4i had been out for a bit, and all these other digital cameras were coming out rapidly, new releases were coming all the time, film photography gear was really cheap, and I knew I could get something solid for a really cheap price. And that was one of the big draws for me. It was like, well, film prices, film gear prices, everything was dropping like this. I knew the quality was there. I knew what you could get with film. I could get back into film at this really low price and explore all these options. That being said, once I decided to go from the T4i to trying some film photography cameras, I didn't know specifically where to start. I mean, I got lost in the YouTube photography wormholes. I found Ted Forbes' channel, Matt Day's channel, and all these things, and I saw thousands of reviews on thousands of different cameras, but didn't know which one to pick. I don't even think I knew of KEH or Use Photo Pro at the time. Maybe KEH, I can't remember, but either way, I just decided to look at the local used market, Craigslist, and whatever was around at the time. And that's when I ran across the Canon EOS Elon 7, which is this camera here. This isn't the specific model that I had, but almost identical to this. And I knew enough that I knew the Canon brand. Obviously, I had a Canon T4i. My dad used Canon when I was younger, and he had some Canon stuff. So I was really very familiar with the Canon brand and comfortable with it. So I was comfortable giving this camera a shot. And thankfully, the person I bought it from took great care of it. It was almost in mint condition. It had a case, all this stuff, and it was well worth the purchase. I even think it had a kit lens too, so it was a full setup. And once I got it, I realized instantly the similarities that the Elon 7 had to my T4i. I saw how they metered the same way. I saw, well, essentially the same way. I saw how autofocus features worked very, very similar. So this camera seemed like a perfect re-entry into the film photography world. And if you've seen older videos on my channel, you know I've reviewed a handful of film cameras from the Canon lineup, the EOS film cameras specifically. I've gone on this journey where I've tried a lot of those cameras. Some of that because I just find them on the used market for literally just dollars, and I figured there wouldn't be any downside to giving them a shot. The other motivating factor was that thing we all do, or a lot of us do often, is chasing the next feature or an improved feature set of this or that, or more of this or that type of thing. Chasing the next thing, and was one of the other things. You know, knowing that, okay, this didn't have spot metering and this didn't have 1/8,000th of a second shutter speed and whatnot. These other cameras do. Okay, I'm gonna need to try those cameras because those have all those features. So that's really the snowball effect that was started by doing that. And I ran through all those EOS film cameras. I'd sold this one, thought the EOS 1N was going to be the main camera. Then I found the EOS 3. I thought, well, no, that's it. It's like one of the ultimate ones. It's going to be my main camera. And you know, shooting a lot with all these cameras, I start to learn what is essential to me. What features can I compromise on, and what features do I need and want? And that journey brought me back to the EOS Elon 7. Ironically, the first re-entry into film photography for me was this camera, and this is the camera I returned to. And I have a couple other EOS film cameras, but right now this is the only one that has batteries in it, and it's the only one I'm shooting with right now. And if you watch my review of this camera, I think it has some of the key points on why I love this camera. But just to give you a quick summary of the biggest things is compact size, weight, build quality combination is at a perfect point with all those aspects. I like the knobs and some of these features on the way the functionality works with that, and just the feel of the camera. I think I can't overstate the importance of the compact size and weight, and the relatively quiet sound of the shutter and mirror slap sound is relatively important too. Somewhere in that journey of trying all these EOS film cameras out, early on really in that journey, I knew I wanted to try manual focus film cameras. Because I knew the lens selection was going to be different than what I could get on the Canon EF series of lenses. So I knew I wanted to try some manual focus cameras. I didn't really have any specific end goal other than wanting to explore the lenses and cameras that were available. And just like finding the EOS Elon 7, I searched the local market and found the Canon FTB, which I don't know if I knew about this camera beforehand, I didn't pay any attention to it. It wasn't until I literally found it on the used market, and it had a lens and this body and a case and all that stuff together at a really, really reasonable price. I got it and shot with it and enjoyed it, but didn't really know why it was unique and what made it unique and what was really good about it until later on. So I got the FTB and started exploring these manual focus cameras. I bounced all around. With Canon and Nikon, I got the I explored all the Nikon FM, FE, FM2, this whole family of cameras I explored, and And that, again, just like with the EOS cameras, it was kind of the snowball effect where I was just buying one, selling it, buying another one. You know, just this rotation of cameras with just the purpose of exploring and seeing what's different with all these cameras. I mean, a little bit of it was chasing a feature or chasing a design aspect or something, but a lot of it was just exploring. But through that exploration of all these cameras, whether it's autofocus or manual focus, I've come to realize some of the key things that keep popping up, some of the things that are important. Some things I knew from the get-go of features that I would be holding at a higher importance than others. The importance of some features I underestimated until you start shooting so much with different cameras that you have to start paying attention to what you're drawn to. Two features that I really, really underestimated, regardless of the format of camera and regardless of whether it's autofocus or manual focus or digital or mirrorless or DSLR or whatever, was compact size. Having the camera be relatively compact size is very important to most of the stuff that I do, especially with street photography. And a relatively quiet shutter in terms of shutter and mirror slap sound, especially for street photography. Those features were stuff that I didn't ignore, but I thought I'm not going to choose a camera just because of those features, because I want specs and I want the fastest shutter that I can get, and I want the best autofocus that I can get, or I want the best camera design or whatever it is. I was prioritizing all this other stuff and realized finally that, okay, I am drawn to cameras that are just a little quieter than others, because it's easier to be discreet when you're shooting in a crowded area. I wanted something that wasn't as heavy as a brick to carry around on the street for multiple hours throughout the day. So it's taken the journey through these cameras that has brought me back to the Elon 7 and these other cameras like the F1 and F3. I hate this whole tribalism thing when it comes to camera brands, computer brands, phone brands, whatever, operating system, all that stuff. I hate the tribal aspect of it. I don't care what people use. I don't care what people prefer in terms of any of that stuff. Camera brands especially. So the Nikon versus Canon debate, whether it's something that came out 40 years ago or something that came out last week, it's kind of pointless to me. You can find stories of really good creative people creating with all kinds of brands of cameras. There's success stories for each of them. There's horror stories for each of them too. So I think the brand argument is pretty much pointless. That being said, there are specific arguments to be made for one camera versus another, just because there are differences, and differences aren't a bad thing. The key point to making the most out of knowing the differences is knowing what works for you and what you prefer and what you're looking for. For some people, you're not going to know until you try it. But I think some people can watch enough videos on YouTube and collect enough information from photographers that have gone through these journeys and maybe save themselves years of experimentation and say, well, that guy has a lot of great points on why that camera is beneficial. And there's not one video that's going to do that for you, but this video hopefully will be added to that conversation for you if you're searching through film photography cameras, deciding what you might land on. The F1 and F3 are similar in many aspects. This is the new F1, by the way. The other F1 that came out before this is this one. This is the F1N. On YouTube, I've heard people call this one the F1N. According to Canon Museum's website, this is the new F1. And that makes sense because the FTB that I have came out the same time as that other Canon F1, and that's the FTB-N as well. So anyway, so the new F1 versus the F3 was really the camera battle for the professional in the early 80s, at least between these two brands. I don't know much about the models of that time, but between these two brands, these were the pinnacle of the 35 millimeter SLR cameras. They're very, very similar in some aspects, meaning that they're both modular. They both have interchangeable prisms, focusing screens, backs. They both can have motor drives. So they're very similar in that aspect, and that was a very, very big deal at the time because cameras lower in the product line didn't have those features. Now, this is one of my dad's older copies of the new F1. So this has some wear and tear because this was used a lot, in professional settings and whatnot. So that being said, I don't know if I can give a perfect comparison between the new F1 and the F3 because this copy of the F3 is near mint, or close to it. It's in really, really great shape. It hasn't been used a ton before I got it. So I don't think it's a fair comparison because I think having a brand new, or at least a fairly newer copy of a camera can make the difference in your perception of that camera. But that being said, if I had to choose between these two today, as of right now, this could change later, or maybe has changed before, I would choose the F3 over the F1. And because I don't shoot sports or wildlife with my film cameras, I don't need anything that shoots multiple frames per second. I'm single shot, and I don't mind manual focus. So that being said, I can make a manual focus film camera my main film camera because most of the street photography stuff I shoot, even if once I revisit I haven't shot landscape in a while, but once I revisit landscapes obviously they can be done with this. You're not shooting anything that moves really fast. So a manual focus camera can be my one film camera if I decide to make it that way. And if I did that right now, it would be this camera. A lot of people wouldn't choose the F3, even in the Nikon lineup. Some people would either go the later cameras, F4, F5, F6, or they would choose the FM2 or something like that. All those are valid choices, and all of them are more than capable of being your only film camera. But I returned to the F3 because I had tried it before, but I returned to the F3 for a few reasons, and I think having a newer copy of the F3 definitely helped me realize some of these benefits, but I'll go through just a basic overview of why I like this camera. So even though this is still, as well built as all the classic cameras were, it's like solid, made of metal. It's still not as heavy as the new F1. I can't remember the weight difference, but just by holding each of them, the new F1 is noticeably heavier. So that right there could be a deciding factor if you consider that they both shoot 1/2000th of a second shutter speed. They're both modular designed. On a general scope, they are even. And weight is one thing you will notice right away that starts to differentiate the two cameras, and that's one thing I've enjoyed, is having a slightly lighter camera that's still well built. But you don't sacrifice anything at all on build quality. As a matter of fact, I think to a certain extent it's better built than the F1, but not because of quality, more about approach. So even though this is lighter, you're not sacrificing anything in build quality. You probably heard 1,000 times, every single review of this camera mentions how smooth the rewind lever is. And it really is true. Unfortunately, I loaded this up with film, so I don't want to fire off any shots and waste any frames for you, unfortunately. But when I do a review video of it, I will. But the rewind lever is super smooth and easy to rewind the film. And that is a benefit when you're out and you're moving quickly. To be able to rewind smoothly is something that's important. The shutter speed dial is really nice and smooth, and that's a reflection of the build quality and smooth operation of the camera. The viewfinder is nice, even if you have the standard viewfinder, both the standard and the HP, really clear and big field of view. And a clear viewfinder is near the top of the list, if not top 3 features of cameras for me, regardless of film or digital, regardless of shooting format. A really nice viewfinder experience is like really, really high on my list. So this delivers on that without a doubt. The like I said before, I've discovered that compact size and relatively quiet shutter and shutter sound and mirror slap sound are important. Something that doesn't feel like you're you know, hitting a hammer on aluminum. That is nice. Something that also doesn't shake the camera. I feel like there are some cameras, when you rewind them and take and shoot and release that shutter, you can feel the camera actually move. So it makes it a little tougher on some cameras to shoot at slower shutter speeds. This one, I feel like it might be one of the best feeling shutter releases out there in terms of the shutter and mirror itself. Which is, it's interesting because I've read some reviews online of people having a different experience, but my copy is smooth and nice, and I really, really enjoy the sound and experience of releasing that shutter. Another really, really important set of features for me that I didn't realize how important it was until I went through this journey of trying a lot of the Nikons and Canons, specifically manual focus cameras. I love the modular design, and not because I plan on getting all these different backs on it to add those features, or not that I intend on getting a ton of different micro prisms or focusing screens or whatnot. I might experiment with the focusing screens a bit. One of the biggest advantages of the modular system for me is that I can take this apart and clean it much more thoroughly than I can clean like an FM, an FM2, my FTB, because I can't, on some of those I can pull out the focusing screens, but they're not really easy to pull out. You can't get to inside the prism and dust off the bottom of the prism in some of those cameras. So being able to pull the prism off, the focusing screen out, I can dust the camera off and clean it out much more thoroughly than I can some of the other ones. And that's a really, really comforting thing. And then on top of that, if something happens to one of those features, the prism or the focusing screen, or even the film door back, I can order another one. So that is something that I've really come to appreciate, is the fact that those aspects can be taken off and cleaned and easily replaced. Okay, so this video is well over 20 minutes, pushing 30 probably. So I want to wrap this up. I just want to have a discussion about film cameras and kind of give a few hints on why and how I landed back to the F3 and the Elon 7 as two of my main film cameras that I use. I've gone through all these cameras and discovered that relatively compact and light is important to me. A modest sounding shutter and mirror slap is important to me. Clear viewfinders are important to me. And the ability to maintain it, to clean it, to replace parts is important to me. And this delivers on all those features and delivers on a few other things too that I can elaborate more on in a full review of the F3, which I will do soon once I shoot through this roll. If you have any questions about one of the cameras I talked about, or if you need advice finding a film camera, whether it's your first or your 100th, let me know, and I'll let you know my experiences so far. I haven't dipped into Minolta, haven't dipped too far into Olympus, so I don't know all of those, but I can again, talk to you about some of the pitfalls or some of the landmarks that I've had on my journey. So let me know in the comments about what your main film camera is, if you have one, or which one you're looking at if you're looking to get into film photography. So if you made it this far in the video, I appreciate it greatly. Thank you as always for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.